cold night air seemed to dance around the old walls of the Shadowed Night Hotel, like the breath of spirits that had lingered there for centuries. The usually bustling city of Phnom Penh had fallen into a sudden silence, leaving the massive building standing alone beneath the pale moonlight. Stories of hauntings here had taken deep root in the hearts of the locals, making everyone fear to approach it at night. A young man named Sophia, a talented horror novelist, was always searching for the source of the most terrifying stories for his next book. He had heard whispers about the Shadowed Night Hotel for a long time, and a strong sense of curiosity had driven him to decide to stay there for one night to experience firsthand what people talked about. On a dark, silent night, Sophia stepped into the hotel's quiet lobby. A cold breeze brushed against his face like an invisible hand caressing him. The dim yellow light from antique lamps reflected off the old dust-covered furniture as if no one had touched it for a long time. A strange, musty odor mixed with the damp smell of old walls disturbed his breathing. Behind the large, imposing reception desk, an old man with a face as pale as paper slowly raised his head. His eyes seemed to be filled with sadness and countless stories. His gray hair was disheveled, and the deep wrinkles on his face showed the passage of a long time spent in this place. "Welcome to the Shadowed Night Hotel," the old man said in a slightly hoarse voice, as if he hadn't spoken for a long time. "What room would you like?" Sophia told him the room number he had booked by phone, and the old man nodded slowly without asking any further questions. He took an old brass room key and handed it to Sophia, his fingertips as cold as ice when they touched Sophia's hand. "Your room is on the 3rd floor," the old man said in a flat tone. "Please don't wander around on the other floors late at night." There seemed to be something hidden behind his words which gave Sophia a strange feeling at his heart. As Sophia walked up the creaking wooden stairs, he felt more and more strongly that many pairs of eyes were watching him from all directions. The old portraits hanging on the walls seemed to follow his movements, and the long shadows cast by the dim lights seemed to dance strangely. Sophia's room was in the middle of the 3rd floor, the floor most notorious for its hauntings. When he inserted the key into the lock and opened the door, a foul odor mixed with the smells of dampness and dust hit his nose so strongly that he almost vomited. The room was as dark as a cave, and the cold air continued to blow as if it would never stop, even though no windows were open. Sophia fumbled for the light switch on the wall, and when the dim yellow light illuminated the room, he began to look around. The furniture in the room was as old and dilapidated as in the lobby. A large wooden bed stood in the center of the room, covered with a thick old blanket with many stains. On the cracked mirror of the dressing table, he saw many fingerprints that looked as if they had just been left recently. Sophia put down his bag and sat on the edge of the bed with an uneasy feeling in his heart. He tried to shake off these negative emotions and told himself that it was just pre-encounter jitters. He took his laptop out of his bag and placed it on an old table near the closed window. As the night deepened, the silence in the hotel seemed to grow heavier. Strange sounds began to emerge little by little. At first, it was just a faint whisper that he couldn't understand, like the wind blowing through the door cracks. Then came the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway outside his room, even though he knew for sure that he was the only guest staying on this floor. Sometimes he heard the sound of doors opening and closing by themselves at the other end of the hallway. Sophia tried not to think too much about these sounds, and he focused on writing his story. But the silence punctuated by strange noises made his feelings increasingly tense. Suddenly, a strong sense of fear enveloped him, as if something unseen was watching him from somewhere in this room. The hairs on Sophia's head began to stand on end, and his heart beat like a drum being struck violently. He felt clearly that there was a presence in the room with him. He slowly raised his head from the computer screen and looked around the room fearfully. At the end of the large bed, he saw a dark shadow standing there. The shadow had the shape of a woman with long, dull black hair covering her face as if she were looking down at him. Even though he couldn't see the eyes of the shadow, he felt as if a pair of cold eyes were piercing him. Fear spread throughout Sophia's body, making his muscles stiff and almost immobile. He wanted to scream at the top of his lungs, but the sound seemed stuck in his throat, refusing to come out. The shadow began to move slowly towards him as if wanting to get closer. With the last bit of courage he could muster, Sophia screamed loudly. Immediately, the dark shadow vanished into the darkness of the room as if nothing had happened. The room returned to silence, leaving Sophia sitting alone and trembling on the bed. Sophia knew he couldn't stay there another night. The fear he had experienced was too real for him to be able to fall asleep. He hurriedly packed his belongings with trembling hands and ran down the stairs as fast as he could, as if something was chasing him. When he reached the lobby, the old man was still sitting in the same place behind the reception desk, his expression unchanged. He seemed to have been waiting for him. "I want to leave now," Sophia said, his voice trembling almost inaudible. The old man nodded slowly and said in the same tone, "I understand. Many people can't stay here for long." He took the room key from Sophia's hand without asking any further questions. As Sophia left the hotel, he turned back to look at the dark building one last time. The pale moonlight shone on the dark windows, as if thousands of eyes were watching him. The cold air still blew, whispering the secrets of the shadowed night hotel. Sophia knew that this terrifying experience would become the source of his most frightening horror story, and he never thought of returning to that terrifying hotel again. But the story of the shadowed night hotel did not end there. After Sophia left, many other guests came to stay there, and each of them experienced different strange events. Some heard the weeping of a woman in the middle of the night. Others saw the shadow of a man in a long coat walking up and down the hallways. One very famous story was about a couple who stayed in room 302. On their first night, they were startled by a soft knocking on the door. When they opened the door to look, they saw no one there. This strange thing happened many times throughout the night until they were so scared they couldn't sleep. The next morning, they told the old man in the lobby about what they had experienced. The old man just nodded silently and said, "Oh, that's probably the spirit of Madame Dumont visiting her room again." Some guests who stayed on the second floor reported hearing strange scratching noises coming from the walls, as if something was scratching from the inside. Sometimes they even felt a cold hand touch them while they were sleeping. As for the staff who worked at the hotel, they lived with these terrifying stories every day. They had grown accustomed to the strange sounds and shadows that appeared and disappeared at night. But there was one place in the hotel that no staff member dared to approach alone: the basement. The door to the basement was always locked, and there were rumors that it was the place where Monsieur Dumont had tortured and killed his servants. Faint groans and the sound of weeping could be heard from below on quiet nights. The old staff warned the new staff never to go near that door if they didn't want to see ghosts. The most horrifying story that was passed down was about a staff member named Lena. Lena was a young woman who had just started working at the hotel. She didn't really believe in ghosts, and she often mocked the stories that other staff members had experienced. One night, Lena was assigned to get some supplies from the storage room located near the door to the basement. As she walked past that door, she felt a cold chill all over her body, as if someone was staring at her from inside. Out of curiosity, Lena tried to open the door, but it was locked tightly. Suddenly, she heard a faint hissing voice calling her name from inside. The voice sounded so terrifying that the hairs on her head stood on end. She tried to listen carefully, but the voice just hissed louder and softer like the wind. Terrified, Lena ran away from there as fast as she could, and she never dared to go near that door again. She also began to believe in the hauntings in this hotel from that moment on. Years later, the Shadowed Night Hotel changed owners many times. Some new owners tried to renovate the hotel to dispel the rumors of hauntings. They repainted the walls, replaced the furniture, and tried to create a fresh atmosphere. But no matter what they did, the darkness and coldness that seemed to be deeply rooted in this building could never be eliminated. New guests continued to encounter strange events, and the rumors of hauntings continued to spread throughout the city. The Shadowed Night Hotel had become a famous place for those who loved horror stories and those who wanted to experience the unexplainable. Sophia himself, after leaving the hotel, took that terrifying experience and wrote a famous novel titled Shadowed Nights of the Haunted Hotel. His book received great support and made many people even more curious about this mysterious hotel. But despite the fame of his book, Sophia never dared to return to the Shadowed Night Hotel. The fear he had experienced that night had left a deep scar in his heart that he could never forget. And the Shadowed Night Hotel continues to stand tall in the middle of the city, forever keeping its dark secrets. The night air still blows, whispering the stories of the spirits that linger there, waiting for new guests who dare to step into this endless world of horror. And the stories of the haunted hotel will continue to be passed down from generation to generation, making everyone fear to approach it on dark, silent nights.